All right, what's up, guys? We got Chuck and Jayhawk here to bring you the NBA in-season tournament semifinals information. Sorry about the late start. We had a little miscommunication on our end. Maybe some of you just saw the underdog stream where I did some daily drafts. Maybe you already have a little bit insight into this slate, but we're going to go ahead and look at DraftKings and FanDuel specific strategies who we're liking for the salaries. Two gamers are two gamers, but we can find some stuff today. Value scarce again, isn't it, Jayhawk?
Yeah, man, it's really scarce. I find myself living in this mid tier, which is I don't love it, but with all this minimal value, I think we kind of have to. So
Yeah. So let's take a look. I think you guys should be able to see the model pretty well here. But I mean, top of the index as usual, very, very clearly Giannis. And then we actually have Tyrese Halliburton second. It's pretty a good amount more than LeBron and AD. I think we're gonna like all of them. LeBron coming in for this 9% and 11% ownership is very interesting, considering that he had probably his best game of the season in the previous one. We know LeBron cares about the in-season tournament. He mentioned, we want that 500K. Like this dude doesn't, he's made half a billion in his career. It doesn't even matter. But just one interesting narrative for the Pacers. And by the way, I believe this is the highest total in NBA history, 257 and a half for the Pacers Bucks. But there's 10 players on the Pacers roster who are making less than $3 million this year. And so the 500,000 is pretty significant to those guys. And while it might not be that significant to Tyrese Halliburton, you know that he's going to be out here trying to win that money for his team. So, from these top four guys, we're going to be interested in all of them. But Jayhawk, where's the first place you're going at the top here?
yeah, man. We mentioned it earlier pre-stream. I mean, it's really tough to avoid Giannis if we can get up to him. 11K seems just too cheap on DraftKings. On FanDuel at 12-1, I think there's more of a consideration to fade him, but at DraftKings at 11K, really, really tough to avoid that price point.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's such a high total. His PRA today is insane. I just don't see any reason to want to get away from him. It's going to be really tough to fit in a couple of these top stud guys, but if we're fitting in Giannis and Tyrese, we do have a couple, mid-range guys that we can fit in around them. I think we just have to consider how common those combos are going to be. But I said this on the last two gamer. I think people try too hard to get different. And so if you have one guy who's coming in, I don't even know what 10% owned guy that we're going to try and find today that's cheap. But if you just have one spot that's a little bit different, then I think that's an advantage. And the field is definitely going to be stacking this first game pretty hard, just given the total difference. But if just one way to get some leverage is to stack the Pelicans Lakers game a little bit more. Now, with the total difference, it's a little bit weirder to do it. I'm not necessarily suggesting it, but it is one idea to get a piece of leverage. So let's go ahead and dive into the guards here. Tyrese Halliburton, Damian Lillard at the top, but where else are we interested in today?
Yeah, man. So guard up top, obviously Halliburton and Lillard both look good if you can get up to either one. Really tough to prioritize either one, especially with Giannis and LeBron and AD on this slate. But in terms of other guards, I find myself getting to a lot. First I want to mention Russell last slate was very chalky, coming in really low on today. I don't know if I'm going to get to him, but I think that's a kind of a talking piece. Going to be way lower on, so I think he's fine in tournaments. And then, yeah, I'm finding myself getting to more Bruce Brown at point guard. I know it's kind of crazy, but guard, like, it isn't special today. We have Alvarado for cheap, but besides up top and really cheap, like, I don't love the mid-tier plays. So, yeah, I'm not huge on guard today. I know it's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's like Bruce Brown has been one of the guys that I've hated to get to all season. And talked about this a little bit earlier, but Buddy Hield has a slightly higher OF index than Bruce Brown. He had a poor showing last game, and at half the ownership on DraftKings, yeah, we're paying $400 more. I do think I prefer Buddy Hield overall. I'm still going to get to a bunch of both of them. And then Malik Beasley's been playing close to 40 minutes every game, and he's right in there in a similar price range at coming in at a decently low ownership. So I don't mind that spot either. But the guy who stands out at the top here, I mean, the only one under 10% ownership, CJ McCollum, 7,700. He played 36 minutes last game. I think he played 39 minutes in the game before that. And so that might be a little spot to get to a little bit more than that 9%.
Yeah, I agree. And on FanDuel, like point guard isn't great, so I could definitely see getting overweight on FanDuel as well with him.
Yeah, I don't hate that either. From these other guys, I mean, we're basically going to mention every single player today. But Austin Reeves versus D'Lo. Austin Reeves had a great game last game. This guy is coming off the bench, but I mean, we only have him projected for 28 minutes. We've seen him get there in 28 minutes pretty regularly, but I am going to prefer D'Lo, just like Jayhawk is. Benedict Mathurin playing more than 20 minutes a game. Trey Murphy. So Trey Murphy's coming back from his injury. His price on DraftKings is definitely too low. I mean, he played 28 or 29 minutes in the last game. We haven't projected for 28 and a half. I mean, is Trey Murphy a big part of what you're building today?
Yeah, man, I've always been a fan of Trey Murphy ever since he joined the Pelicans. He's just been a very steady fantasy producer. Obviously, he's reliant off his shot, kind of what he's known for, but he just seems too cheap here. 4,900. There is no Matt Ryan for New Orleans, which should kind of cement his minutes floor. So I really like him at his price point on DraftKings.
Yeah, and even on FanDuel, he doesn't get the 3 point bonus, but 5,500, we don't have a lot of options today. And we kind of saw this on the last two gamers, where not every position is necessarily going to hit that 5x value threshold that we usually go for. So Trey Murphy coming in at lower ownership on FanDuel, I don't mind it either. Cam Reddish, I think his price is probably okay. Played 20, close to 30 minutes last game. He's going to keep doing that. And then Beauchamp was like, he actually didn't come in as chalky as I expected, but we had him projected for crazy ownership, and it's just due to having no value. Are you getting back to Beauchamp today?
Yeah, so I did get a little bit bail yesterday or last night with Beauchamp. He did get a couple steals, barely got to 13 fantasy points. I don't know if I love him here. It is a good matchup against Indiana, but I really only want to get to him if I'm prioritizing maybe two studs, maybe Hallie and Giannis, Dame and Giannis. Kind of just if I'm paying up for studs, I would be fine getting to him, but I don't want to, like prioritize him in a single entry or anything like that.
Yeah, I will say the 6% ownership, like, I didn't like him at whatever ownership he was coming in at last time. I still don't like him, but at 6% ownership, we haven't projected for 18 minutes. I don't mind getting to Beauchamp today as much as I did on the last slate. And then we mentioned Jose Alvarado had a blow up game. The difference in the ownership from DraftKings to FanDuel makes sense to me. It's just, even though he's basically the same price on both sites, it's easier to build on FanDuel. Gets the extra point for steals too. He has that little weird move he does where he just sits in the corner. D'Angelo's too smart for that, so he's probably not going to get taken advantage of. But Jose Alvarado's pretty good. And I do want to mention Campaign. We only have him projected for 14 minutes. He only played 14 minutes in the last game. But at 3 and 5% ownership, we're not projecting a blowout. It's a 5.5 point spread. But Campaign, I mean, if he just puts up a decent score in his 14 minutes, maybe it's a blowout and he gets possible blowout run at 3 and 5%. I'm going to take some shots there. Are you?
Yeah, man, I like that, especially yeah, at his ownership. Like, I think it's a really good play. Especially like Beauchamp. If he's obviously not chalk, but if he would have been chalk, I would have loved Payne. And I think he's a fine low on play. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
And AJ Green came in the first quarter last game in the first rotation and hit three threes. I think he only finished with 10 and a half fantasy points over on FanDuel, but 4%, 1% ownership, 3,300 and 3,500. Are you getting there at all?
I don't know, man. I think I'd rather play Payne. AJ Green seems probably a little bit too fringe for me to get there, but I guess you could throw on like 1 or 2% if you're making 150 lineups. Just hope he hits his shots.
Yeah, I mean, him to even get that 10 and a half fantasy points again, I think is kind of it's optimistic. And the only way that AJ Green ends up in the winning lineup today is if you really need a guy that cheap for the last spot and you get every spot probably exactly correct. So out of everyone on this list, I'll probably have shares of most of them, but not AJ Green.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
And just sorting by DK value, Chris Middleton at the top, Tyrese Halliburton, second most expensive player on the slate, showing up number 2. It's pretty significant. We said that with Trae Young yesterday, and Trae Young didn't work out, but it's not always going to work out in DFS. But Tyrese Halliburton is going to look awesome today. Malik Beasley on DraftKings at this lowish ownership. I mean, anyone under 20% owned on a 2-game slate is low owned, and he's 5,700. It's not great, but he's playing like heavy minutes and showing up as number 3 in DK value, significant. Bruce Brown, BI, Buddy Hield, Dame. Like, I think these are the guys that we want to focus on a little more today. The model doesn't love Trey Murphy for some reason. 28.5 minutes isn't great, but at 4,900, he is going to help us do some things with our build. And then looking at points per dollar value, D'Angelo versus Austin Reeves. I mean, Jayhawk and I both seem to like D'Lo more than Austin Reeves, and the model agrees with us. So
Yeah, man, especially at that ownership discount we're getting him from the last slate the Lakers were on. I really like that.
and yeah, let's take a look at actually, let's look at FanDuel value real quick, just in case something sticks out as a little bit different. Malik Beasley, number one FanDuel value play, coming in at 50% ownership. I don't hate it. Him, Chris Middleton, I am going to love Buddy Hield today. His price is up a little bit, and he had a bad game last game. He's projected for 30. I think he has the potential to play a couple more than 30. He also has the potential to play a couple less than 30. So it's a little riskier, but Buddy Hield's a spot I like getting to on both sites, and it doesn't seem like anyone else really stands out on FanDuel, right? I mean, we have Dame coming in for crazy ownership, but that's just product of like what other point guards are really even available today.
Yeah, man, it's rough over there on the FanDuel point guard streets. It is very slim pickings.
Yeah, and I do like Dame today.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure who the other point guard that's going to be, but Dame's probably just going to end up in all my FanDuel lineups just because of the positioning, and there's just not that many starting point guards on this slate. But CJ McCollum at $1,000 less at a pretty low ownership, I think that's a pretty decent spot to get to as well.
Completely agreed. And then you mentioned campaign. If you wanted to take a stab, I wouldn't hate that either.
Yeah. So I saw this on the last slate on the two gamer with Dame, and the Knicks were on it. I'm pretty sure most of my builds just automatically had Dame and Jalen Brunson just because they were very clearly the two best point guards. And D'Angelo and Campaign both had shooting guard eligibility on FanDuel. And so if you want to swap out, I mean, I imagine most of my builds today are going to start with Tyrese and Damian Lillard. But all these other three guys that we're going to be interested in, CJ McCollum, D'Angelo Russell, and Campaign, they all have shooting guard eligibility. And so I think we just mix it up a little bit. If we want to mix in a little Campaign or Jose Alvarado, hope that one of Tyrese Halliburton or Dame fails. And Tyrese Halliburton's price on FanDuel is kind of insane, but he's actually still the top FanDuel value despite that, like being so much more expensive than anyone else. So I'm probably just going to try to force in Tyrese and see what I get.
Yeah, man, Tyrese. I just saw a stat yesterday that Tyrese and Trae Young have been incredible the past couple games, and Tyrese, he's got extra motivation to play today. I like Tyrese a lot.
Yeah, and dude, Tyrese has got to be an MVP candidate. I don't think the Pacers are going to win enough games, but he's been one of the absolute best players in the NBA this year. So I'm pretty happy for him to see that.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like, so kind of along the same lines. Giannis is the top FanDuel value play as the most expensive player on the slate. Like, how are we not just jamming in Giannis at 20% and 23% owned for Giannis on a 2-game slate? That's low owned. Like, how are we not just jamming in these two guys today?
Yeah, and the highest over under. I mean, it's 30 points bigger than the other over under the later games. So I think that's kind of crazy that he's coming in this long with this high of a over under.
Yeah, and like the model just very clearly has him as such. It's just the best play on the slate today. Though he's the most expensive, it's going to be tough to fit him in, but I don't see how I'm going to avoid it at all. I'm going to have so much Giannis. And then kind of along the same lines, LeBron James, 9%, 11%. He's one of the better FanDuel value plays at above 10K. I mean, I'm going to get to a bunch of LeBron. I don't know that we're going to be able to fit all three of them in the same lineup, but I guess I'm just going to try to mix it up between these three and get as much of them as I can.
Yeah, man. I mentioned LeBron on the last stream. Everyone was going to AD. I absolutely love LeBron in the last spot. Just particularly in these do or die games. Really competitive, wants to win for his team. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm going to prefer LeBron once again to AD. I just think he loves winning and he wants to win for the younger guys on the team. So
yeah, I mean, I think I made a joke on the last stream. Like, they're going to name this tournament the LeBron Cup after he retires. I mean, how do the Lakers not win the first in-season tournament, right? I mean, we saw some shenanigans at the end of the Suns game, and they actually benefited the Suns, by the way, if you read like the pool report from the referees after. But Lakers are winning tonight. Like, the Lakers are probably going to win the tournament. It's what the NBA wants. They're only 3-point favorites, but I think it's pretty likely one of LeBron or Anthony Davis has a pretty good game tonight. Other guys on FanDuel value, who should we be most interested in here?
Yeah, so I actually kind of like. I know this is probably a hot take for the field, but I actually kind of like Obi Toppin on FanDuel. 5,100 power forward. We already mentioned we liked Giannis and LeBron, but it seems like most of the field's going to flock to um, Neesmith, Aaron Neesmith for Indiana. And Toppin did lose run at the end of the game. He did not close, but I think there's a possibility he could close today. I do like him a lot as a FanDuel value at 5,100. So that's kind of my conviction play with Obi Toppin there.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the ownerships, like sure, Aaron Naismith is a little bit cheaper, but for half the ownership, we can pay a little bit more and get to Obi Toppin. And I didn't have a chance to build out my lineups yet, so maybe that 400 really matters. But it just seems like a pretty easy leverage play to play a little bit more Obi Toppin and a little bit less Aaron Naismith. Obi Toppin looks so much better than he did the first few games of the season, the first few weeks. His playing time's been up, his production's been up. And so he's kind of a different player, and I like getting to Obi Toppin. I was pretty heavy on him in the last game. Didn't exactly work out, didn't kill me either. But Naismith, he's going to be a fine play too. I don't hate playing them both together. They do share the court a little bit, and so if that's just the way your lineup shakes out, I don't think that's the worst.
Yeah, man. The only thing I'm fine with playing them both, but most likely we only see one close, which
Mhm.
probably would. I think I don't want to max one or the other, but if you're doing single entry, I don't know if I'd love getting to both in like one lineup. But if you're 150 maxing, I think it's fine to get to both.
Oh, I agree with that completely. Yeah, if I'm hand building, I'm only going to play one, but I don't think I want to put the restriction in to max one of them in my MME set.
Right there with you.
And then I've already mentioned I prefer Buddy Hield over Bruce Brown today, but on FanDuel, their ownerships are the same. Buddy Hield's a little bit cheaper. Like, and I'm not saying I'm going to play all the Buddy Hield and no Bruce Brown, but maybe if I have something like I don't know, just a little bit more Buddy Hield than I have of Bruce Brown. But Bruce Brown's been playing really well. You hate to see it, but gonna have to play some Bruce Brown today, probably no matter what happens. Chris Middleton up here, very close to the top of FanDuel value, right after Giannis, and we only have him projected for 26 minutes. It's unlikely he plays more than that. But at the 6,200 price, if he gives us around 30 fantasy points, I think we're going to be pretty happy with that on today's slate.
Yeah, man. Middleton, he's been playing limited minutes, like you mentioned, but he's actually been pretty productive. So I like him on both sides, particularly on FanDuel. Should get the extra point for blocks and steals. So I like Middleton a ton. Right there with you.
Just going down the list here, the model does not love Zion today, and I personally don't love Zion either. But at these low ownerships, I feel like we have to take some shots if we're making a bunch of lineups, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I think you definitely have to take shots on him.
Yeah, like he's not going to be in my single entry by any means, but with CJ McCollum back too, with Trey Murphy back, it's going to cut into his production a little bit. So Zion is not a good play today, but just based on no one else playing him, especially on DraftKings, I think we have to try and get a couple shares of him if we're making a bunch of lineups. Bobby Portis, I don't mind though. At 5,400 on both sites, his ownership seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah, man. And I think, I'm not in love. We'll get into centers, but I'm not in love with Brooke Lopez today. And I think Portis could be the beneficiary of that. So I like Portis, especially at the reduced ownership to a Chalky Lopez.
I think I'm going to be on the other side of you on that one, but we'll take a look when we get to centers.
Sounds good.
Torian Prince, actually surprised he's showing up this high. He's not good relative to his peers. But 3,900 on FanDuel, I get it. He's going to help us do some things with our lineups. He did not close. I'm not sure that we should expect him to close. And sure, it's possible he gets there without those closing minutes. We haven't projected for 27. I think that's actually a little bit too high of a projection. He could definitely get there, but I think it's more reasonable to project him for 23, 24 minutes. And so even just those few minutes, it's like it's going to affect how the model sees him. And so I think he's a little bit too high on here. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think he's probably too high. And sorry, I was looking at the model. Who did you just say? I was looking at the
Oh,
ownership.
Torian Prince.
Torian Prince. Yeah, I don't know. He's fine. With Cam Reddish fully back and the rest of the forwards kind of just splitting minutes. And then obviously Vanderbilt's back as well. Don't love it. If he's like a last piece in, make sure line of fit. I think he's fine, but I'm not like running to play him, I guess. I think he's fine.
Yeah, I mean, the way Torian Prince gets there, and he really doesn't even need to put up that 5x on FanDuel. If he just lets us fit the other pieces that we're trying to get, then that's probably enough, as long as he doesn't completely dud. I mean, he's not a terrible play, but it's not someone who And I say that now, but I'm pretty sure just talking about all the high price players we want to fit in, I'm going to end up with a ton of Torian Prince. But it's not because I want to play Torian Prince. It's just I want to play everyone else, and he's going to allow us to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like out of the value guys, he's probably the safest in terms of floor because we know Beauchamp doesn't really have a floor. The rest of these guys don't really have a floor. I think Prince has more of a floor than everyone else.
I'll agree with that. Yeah, at least we know Prince is probably going to start, and so just starting. Hopefully, he plays well in those minutes, and he can just stay on the court because the Lakers are pretty much fully healthy now, especially with Vanderbilt back. There's a lot of guys that could cut into his playing time. Rui's back from his injury too. And speaking of Rui, I mean, 4,100 4K. I believe he played 22 minutes in the last game. He's pulling in some actually decent ownership. How do we feel about these guys? Rui versus I'm forgetting who is our Cam
Torian,
Reddish,
okay.
Rui versus Cam Reddish versus Torian Prince versus Jared Vanderbilt. How do we feel about these Lakers guys?
Yeah, so in terms of like my favorite fantasy guy, it's probably Rui. He didn't really produce as well as he typically would in 20 minutes, but he's definitely I think the highest fantasy point per minute guy. So if he can produce at 4,100, I think he looks pretty solid. Reddish, I just prefer. I don't know. Reddish is very scoring line. I'm not. I don't. I'm kind of in between with Reddish. I think it'd probably be Prince and Hachimura for me. I think those guys are probably safer to get you around 20. So that's probably the route I would go.
Yeah, it's just my one thing with Rui is that he has virtually no chance of closing. This guy could come in and score 20 points in a row in the fourth quarter, and Darvin Ham is still not going to let him play those last few minutes. And so I think he's fine, but this ownership actually seems a little bit high to me. I'm going to try to get to the other guys, I think. Trey Murphy, once again, not showing up as good value over on FanDuel, but I don't mind him. If we're going to get to Trey Murphy a little bit, I think it's okay. Jared Vanderbilt, I think he's such a poor fantasy producer, and we only have him projected for 17 minutes. He's coming in low owned though, and he's 3,800 on both sites, so I don't hate it. But Herb Jones is the guy that I'm actually going to be pretty interested in. I'm kind of disappointed the rest of the field is getting there too, but 5,500 on DraftKings, 6K on FanDuel. I think Herb Jones is a pretty good. Like I'd like to call him a GPP play today, but it looks like he's going to be chalk.
Yeah, man. I know you're a huge Herb Jones guy, and I'm right there with you. I played him the last slate. Had a really good game. I think he should be able to do it once again. My only concern is guarding LeBron. Could get into foul trouble, but as long as he can stay out of foul trouble, should play most, if not all, the game. So I love Herb Jones here. Probably my favorite forward play. I wouldn't say on the slate, but I like him a lot today. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I mean he is among my favorite forward plays on the slate, so I imagine I'm going to be over the Fields ownership on him anyway.
Definitely.
And the last spot I want to talk about here, Anthony Davis is showing up as not great FanDuel value. I mean, his price is up, but the difference between him and LeBron is pretty decent. And so, like Jayhawk mentioned earlier, are we going to prefer LeBron a little bit today, especially on FanDuel?
Yeah, I think just in terms of what he's playing for right now, like if it was the regular season, probably would say AD. I mean, it is regular season, but since it's the end season tournament,
Right.
I think it's probably LeBron for me. Yeah.
And over on DraftKings, it's different. I do like getting the AD some over on DraftKings, but it looks like the field does too. But I mean, if we're just playing the ownership game, just play more LeBron James. This is incorrect. I'm pretty sure he's going to come in higher than this, but we're not going to be that far off of our of what he actually comes in at. So I think just play more LeBron.
Yeah, completely agree with you.
And we have comment chat. Sean V. Imagine fading Ingram. We didn't tell you to fade Ingram. We like Ingram today. I mean, especially at 24% and 28% now, his production doesn't take that big of a hit with CJ McCollum back, and maybe that's why people aren't going to get there as much, or maybe they're just paying a little bit more to get to Giannis, LeBron, Tyrese Halliburton, and so Ingram's just kind of the guy that gets pushed out. But I think Ingram's a pretty great play today.
Yeah, man. I between the three studs, Ingram probably be my favorite. We got to also account for this is technically your revenge back in the old days. He did play on the
Mhm.
Lakers. I think he had a pretty. I think he liked the Lakers, but could want to show off tonight against LeBron and his old team. So I like him a lot. I agree. Don't
And
fade Ingram.
yeah, we're not fading Ingram. We haven't projected for 38 minutes. That's pretty significant. So let's go ahead and jump into centers. And we kind of mentioned we have differing views on Brooke Lopez. I mean, I was all in on Brook Lopez last time, and it looks like I'm going to go all in on Brook Lopez again today. Hopefully, it works out again. He's projected for way higher ownership than he was on the previous 2 game slate, though. Um, so we have Brook Lopez, Miles Turner, Jonas as basically the three main center places. I guess Anthony Davis too. Talk to me about these guys.
Yeah, man. So when I initially looked at the slate, I was all over Brook Lopez. I thought he was a smash play, but then I looked into the game logs, the past games, kind of Turner versus Lopez. And in the past, I mean, Turner has dominated Lopez. I get, every game is different, but with this high pace, high tempo, I think I'm going to prefer Turner to Lopez. I think Turner thrives more in this scenario. I don't know. It's really close. I think they're both really solid, but I think I'd rather play Turner over Lopez. I already mentioned I kind of like Portis as a pivot to a really chalky Lopez.
Yeah, I don't mind that either. If we're pairing Miles Turner with Bobby Portis and hoping Brook Lopez just plays poorly or gets played off the court, even I don't think that's a bad way to go. I do know that I'm going to be pretty heavy on Brook Lopez today, especially on FanDuel, where if he gets like 7 blocks again, then he's just going to be in the optimal almost no matter what else happens in the game. But we don't necessarily need a ceiling outcome from center to win today. And we kind of saw this last game. There was a lineup I posted in Discord that was less than 1 fantasy point away from shipping a tournament on FanDuel. And it had JaVale McGee at min price scoring 4 fantasy points. And that could just be a product of no other center going off. But it's something to consider that if these centers all have average games, and I'm not recommending to play Jared Vanderbilt in the center spot, especially on draft. Well, maybe on DraftKings it's a little bit different, but um, like we don't necessarily need a ceiling game. If none of these centers have a ceiling game, then it's just whatever one is going to help us fit in the other guys in our lineup, right?
Yeah, man, definitely. And I think like in terms of double center, I think it's perfectly fine to go Turner Lopez. Just note that most of the field most likely does that too. If
Hmm.
assuming the ownerships stay where they're at right now. So just know that like if you are going double center, just look at the rest of your lineup. Make sure you're not playing every single piece of chalk. Try to get different in 1 or 2 spots. But I mean, they're chalk for a reason, right? 2 centers. If Turner's going off, they probably want him in, which probably means Lopez is in as well. So totally get why they're chalk.
Yeah, and if you want a little leverage play off of those 2 guys, just mix in more Jonas Valanciunas. He hasn't been playing great lately, but we know he has a ceiling. Even though CJ McCollum's back, it is going to be a hit to his production. But I mean, Jonas at these ownership numbers on this slate, I think he looks pretty good at this price too.
Yeah, man. Jonas is kind of the odd man out for I think everyone. And I like him. Like, did he get into foul trouble last game? I didn't watch the game, but I think he should be in for a good bounce back game here, especially at that low ownership. I don't mind him at 1 bit, especially as a pivot to Lopez.
I think that is the GPP pivot at the center spot today, because everyone else has power forward eligibility over on DraftKings anyway, and so you don't want to play any of these centers. Like JR just said, you could just plug in Bobby Portis and play another position in the utility and just avoid all of them, and you're getting such massive leverage on the field. Not necessarily recommending it, but it's just an idea if you don't necessarily love any of these center guys.
Yeah, man, I'm right there with you. I think no one's going to do that either. I think everyone wants a center, particularly one of them from this first game. So I think that should be
Mhm.
really contrarian. And then you could probably just jam chalk as well. If you did that, you don't really need to worry about ownership for the most part. Play all the top plays and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I don't know if the field considers too much. Like everyone wants to get this low owned play into their lineups, but if you're fading 2 pieces of heavy chalk, that's leverage right there. Like a lot of people are going to have them in their lineups. If they both fail, then I mean, you're just no matter who you play, you probably have an advantage over most of the field. So something to consider. And for FanDuel, it looks like the value, the order of the value is essentially the same. And so we didn't mention Giannis just because he is power forward eligible, but he's another idea to play in the center spot if you don't necessarily love any of the 2 chalk centers.
Yeah, man, I think that's a great option. I feel like no one's going to do that, right? Like that's already going to be unique. Then you can plug in another power forward. We mentioned we like LeBron. Herb Jones is power forward eligible. There's a ton of guys we can throw in at that power forward spot. So I like that. I like that option a lot.
And so we're not going to be able to build the dummy on screen today, but who do you think we should be starting our lineups with? Let's do DraftKings first.
I think for me, it's gotta be Giannis. I know he's
Yep.
really expensive, but I'm just gonna find a way to get him in. I mean, if he goes for anything north of 60, 65, like I don't see any way he isn't opti. I think if LeBron went off, he could find his way out of optis, but it's gonna be tough, man. If he goes for 65, 70, really tough for me to avoid.
Yes, I agree. And so the way that I typically build my dummy builds or from hand building a lineup that night, I usually like to start with the value just to
Okay.
see like my favorite values, I guess, and start to see what studs I can fit in. Um,
I like that.
but but like with you, like yeah, like Giannis and Tyrese are the first two players I want to get in my lineup. But just one thing to consider for you guys out there, I think it is easier to plug in the value that you like and just see if it is easy to fit in Tyrese and Giannis rather than plugging in Giannis and Tyrese and just fitting in bad value around him. Maybe we can swap out one of those guys for LeBron, who's pretty reasonably priced and extremely low owned. I think he's one of our favorite pivots as well. Um, and then from the mid range, like I mentioned, like Bruce Brown, 5,800 on DraftKings. I hate him, but it's going to be really tough to avoid. I don't mind Buddy Hield as a pivot. Rui, he's 4,100, but I feel like this is a spot I'm going to try not to get to. And I say that now, but I'm probably going to end up getting there anyway just because I have no choice. But Benedict Mathurin at this huge ownership, highest owned player on the slate. Are we going to play Benedict Mathurin tonight?
So I had debated this back and forth as well. This is one of the chalk players. I was like, should I play him? I think with just like the minimal value at 4,700, if he does indeed score well, I think he probably sees around 30 minutes again, 28 to 30 minutes. And I like him, especially if you're not getting to Halliburton. I think he makes sense as getting a score that's not Halliburton, that's keeping them in the game. So I like him a lot, but that's just me.
I mean, it's possible that. So I don't know if he was ever in Rick Carlisle's good graces, but coming off the bench, like even when he was starting, he was getting benched pretty regularly. Like he had a few blow up games. I remember one time he was like mega owned and he just played his season high minutes for whatever reason. He was having a really good game, so I do get it. But even this 24.8 minutes projection we haven't projected for, I think it's a little bit too high because I just don't think that he has that much potential to play more, but I think he has the potential to play less. But again, he's so cheap, and if we're trying to fit in Giannis and Tyrese Halliburton, it's tough to avoid all of these guys. I mean, the alternatives. Trey Murphy's pulling a ton of ownership on DraftKings. Aaron Naismith is pulling a ton of ownership on DraftKings. Even Rui, I think the 24% ownership is kind of high for him. So
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And one thing I want to mention with Neesmith and Toppin, I forgot to mention earlier, if we do see Toppin get out of the starting lineup and they bring in Neesmith, I will like Neesmith a lot more.
mhm.
Um, it's kind of going to come down to whoever starts there for me.
I like that call. One thing with Obi Toppin, if they end up switching it up for whatever reason, and Naismith is starting and Obi Toppin's off the bench, like I already kind of think Obi Toppin's ownership is low. He could be even less owned if he ends up not starting. And since this is the first game, we will have that information. I'm gonna like Obi Toppin more as a just a pretty contrarian pivot. And we got Smitty mentioning a guy. Shout out to you, Smitty, for mentioning the lowest owned play on the slate projected for more than 10 minutes. Najee Marshall. I have to check how many minutes he played in the previous game, but yeah, Najee Marshall's in play for sure at this 4K and 3,800 prices, 3% and 4% owned. I don't mind taking some shots on there, despite the guys from the Pelicans being back.
Yeah, man, I don't mind taking sabs. It is a 2 game slate, so if we get one of these lower on value pieces to hit, we could be golden. So I don't mind that at all.
Yeah, we don't need much from him to be happy that we played him in our lineups. I would say like the only low owned, because if a guy's low owned, you can play him. You can take shots on him. The only one I'm avoiding down here is AJ Green. Even at the salary, what are we expecting to happen, right?
I think I mean, he got 12 last game. I mean, I think a normal game probably from him is like 5 to 10. If 10, if you're lucky, like he's got to really hit all the shots.
Yeah, and Smitty in the chat preferred Bruce Brown or Healed on FanDuel. Pretty sure my default answer is going to be a Buddy Healed. Looks like the model and 14.4 value versus 13.2 value. It's not a huge difference, but we do have Bruce Brown projected for 35 minutes while we only have Buddy Healed projected for 30 minutes, and they're essentially the same price. They're essentially the same ownership. And so just using the model as a tiebreaker, like my personal feelings, I do prefer Buddy Healed anyway. And the model seems to agree.
Yeah,
Do you have a different feel?
I actually prefer Buddy on FanDuel. I like that Bruce Brown has guard eligibility on DraftKings. I think I prefer Bruce Brown on DraftKings, Buddy on FanDuel.
I
Because
like that.
Bruce
Yeah.
Brown's only small forward on FanDuel, so that's kind of why.
Yeah, and like Buddy Hield for half the ownership over on DraftKings, we like that, but he's also $400 more expensive. But he has the 3 point bonus. I mean, Bruce Brown hits threes too, but if we're gonna get that kind of, I don't want to say ceiling game, but like good game from Buddy Hield, he's probably gonna be hitting threes, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, I like both, but I think they're both fine. Like, I don't really have like a huge stand on either one.
I don't have a huge stand, but I do. I mentioned this on the underdog stream. Like, if we're choosing between Buddy Hield and Bruce Brown, I probably want somewhere around 65% Buddy Hield versus 35% Bruce Brown if I'm only picking one or the other. And it's an imperfect analogy for the way that DFS stuff works. But, and we had a question in the Discord actually. Why do we not like Zion, even though he has a pretty decent OF index? It's just like look at the guys above him. You know, Zion 8,400 on DraftKings. Miles Turner's a better OF index play. Brandon Ingram's a better OF index play for cheaper. And then like if we're playing Zion, we're going to have to forego probably one of Giannis or Tyrese Halliburton. And I'd rather just pay the extra and get to Giannis or Tyrese. Like Zion was a player I was having trouble getting to with CJ McCollum out, with Trey Murphy out, and now with those two guys in. Like I think that the 5% ownership is probably appropriate. But if you're going to take a shot and that's your that's your leverage stand, your play, then I don't hate it. But even over on FanDuel, where it is easier to fit in more good players at 8,300, honestly, I might just do a really risky thing and just X them out of my player pool today.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Like, it's just really tough to prioritize him when we can just get up to LeBron, Giannis, Halliburton. I mean, even Ingram. I don't know what their price difference is, but I prefer him as well. Just really tough. And didn't his minutes get cut down too or something? I don't know. It's I just rather would get those guys.
Yeah, and maybe it's just some bias not liking Zion, but out of all of the Pelicans players, like I'm playing BI first and foremost, CJ McCollum, like these other guys are cheaper, but yeah, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Jonas, I'd rather get to those guys over Zion. But like I said, Zion's coming in very low on DraftKings. The 23% on FanDuel, it's not quite like high enough where like, fading him is a huge leverage, but I just don't want him to kill my lineups tonight. And I think Zion's actually probably my least favorite play on the board. But like I said, I might be biased. The model has him okay. But I guess just another thing to like strengthen my point is that there's no one below him more expensive than him. So the model is saying that he is the worst expensive player, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. Like, I just don't like him tonight. Again, I may be a little bit biased too. I've just never been really a huge Zion guy. I really play him unless he like CJ and Brandon Ingram are out. I really struggle to really play him.
Yeah, and so it's not necessarily that the model doesn't like Zion, but compared to everyone else around him, the model likes him the least, or the model just likes everyone else more. And so, it's not much leverage, but that's a spot where I'm just going to take some leverage and not let him kill even two of my lineups. So,
Agreed.
Do we have any final thoughts before we get out of here, Jack?
Not really. Just I'm targeting. I know you're probably targeting the first game really heavily. We mentioned we liked a lot of the New Orleans guys, and then LeBron on the Lakers side. So probably it's gonna be overweight in this first game, as the over under is really, really high, and looks like a clear cut, really good game to target.
I like it. And you have so many questions. I mean, the second game locks like 4 hours after the first game. So we're going to have a lot of time to make smart late swaps. If you're behind, you miss out on the best scores from the first game to swap to some low owned guys in the second game, try to churn out a min cash. Yeah. We'll be hanging out in the Discord. And I guess we didn't really give like a FanDuel core today, but it's basically the same players. I mean, Damian Lillard's the highest priced player on FanDuel, but he's been pretty consistent, scoring 40 plus fantasy points. I don't think we have to worry about him. And similar to the other day, it's just if him and Tyrese Halliburton are the only 2 point guards that put up reasonable scores, then they're just going to be in the winning lineup by default. So I think starting with Halliburton and Lillard there is pretty strong. Whatever you want to do at center, Brook Lopez, Miles Turner, Jonas Valanciunas as the pivot, or just like get a little bit weird with Anthony Davis or Bobby Portis. Benedict Mathurin, I mean, he's going to be a fine play. It's going to be hard to avoid him, even though we don't necessarily love him. Aaron Naismith, really high ownership. Don't mind getting to Obi Toppin. I know I already asked you, but any last thoughts on this FanDuel core?
I think you pretty much nailed it. Those are kind of the guys we mentioned Healed as a pivot. I don't have Bruce Brown chalk, but we were like Healed on FanDuel as well.
Yeah, I agree. No, I agree with that.
And then yeah, nothing better than some afternoon basketball. I don't think we've had this. I mean, it'll be 2 o'clock for you right when the game starts. You're on the
Yeah,
West Coast. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
we've
kind of
had this for a
annoying.
minute. I don't mind it. I didn't have any class today, so I'm just gonna be on my couch watching the game. So should be fun 2 games slate here.
I love it. And just before we get out of here, we mentioned something if Naismith starts. We just got the starting lineup. Toppin is confirmed starting. So I like Toppin at the lower ownership than Naismith, but if Naismith helps your lineup work, I don't mind it either. So appreciate you guys watching. See you guys next time. Thanks.
See you guys.
Oh, gotta figure out how to do this.